TV monitors aboard the president's plane show flickering images of the destruction in New York and Washington.
Some stations would fade in and fade out, so we weren't getting complete reports, just kind of pieces, bit by bit.
It is just 50 minutes since the second tower of the World Trade Center was struck.
You can see the firemen assembled here, the police officers, FBI agents, and you can see the two towers. A huge explosion now, raining debris on all of us. We better get out of the way!
It is 9:59 a.m.
The second building that was hit by the plane has just completely collapsed. The entire building has just collapsed. It folded down on itself, and it is not there anymore.
The whole side has collapsed?
The whole building has collapsed. The building has collapsed.
Whew. This is what it looked like moments ago. My God.
Another 30 minutes ticked by.
It's a very strong building, as you remember from the blast the last time, so...
But what does it take as an engineer to do this all? Oh, no.
The second and last tower has just collapsed.
The second tower. Both trade towers have now been attacked and destroyed, with thousands of people either in them or in the immediate area adjacent to them.
Duff and Nasty watch from their jet fighters high overhead as the towers collapse.
I kind of just looked back over my shoulder and I looked and I said, man, I called it right away. I said, I can't see Lower Manhattan.
I didn't know what to think. That might be some sort of other attack.
So I went up to take a look at it. So I was right over the top of it, looking down. And as I was looking at it, all of a sudden it just started getting smaller. And to me, it didn't make sense. And to see this thing just falling away from me, and then I realized what was going on. It's absolutely the sickest feeling I've ever had in a plane.
Meanwhile, in the White House bunker,
mood was very somber at that point. I've seen pictures as we sat there and watched on television, as you could see that first building collapse.
On Air Force One, reporters recoil in horror.
It's worse than any disaster movie. We'd been in the air for 2 hours, and as the plane was beginning to lose altitude, Ari Fleischer came back and told us, the president is going to keep moving.
We didn't have a full load of fuel. I said, well, the nearest secure facility that we can refuel the plane is Barksdale, headquarters of the 8th Air Force. And so we flew into Barksdale.
Air Force One touches down at the air base in Louisiana. It is just before noon. On the tarmac, Fleischer holds a brief news conference.
I said, for the credibility of this president, not only for the American people, but for the world, you need to have press with you to say this is where the president is and what he's doing. It's not enough to have Air Force One jet off into the sunset and have none of us know where he is.
Surrounded by armed guards, the president goes inside to call the White House bunker.
Got on the phone with the vice president, and he said to him, I can't wait to find out who did it. It's going to take a while, and we're not going to have a little slap on the wrist crap.
Air Force One is refueled. President Bush records a statement to the nation.
Oh, there's no question he was angry. He was hot. It was reflected in his words, and I'll never forget it. His first reaction is, we are at war.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward, and freedom will be defended.
And I swear his eyes were red-rimmed. Not the crying kind of red rim, but a stress and attention.
The United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts.
Air Force One lifts off again with a lighter load. Aboard are just a few key aides and Secret Service agents. The press pool has been trimmed from 13 to 5.
And Ari Fleischer told us, I can't tell you where we're going. And you got the distinct feeling it's because he didn't know, because they didn't know.
I remember thinking it was like being on the Twilight Zone plane because there was nobody around anymore.
The fear was palpable. Fear for the country, fear for the structure of the government, agents fearful of protecting the chain of command, the line of succession.
Jet fighters appear just off the wing.
This fighter jet was so close. It was so close I could see the pilot's face. And I had my face, you know, just pressed right up against the little portal window. And I can't tell you, I was instantly calm.
In his cabin, the president wants to get back to the Capitol.
And finally, he just basically said, I'm not going to let, you know, whoever did this keep the President of the United States out of Washington, D.C. We're going.
But first, another stop at Offutt Air Force Base outside Omaha, Nebraska. The president and his aides disappear into a tiny brick building and descend to a blast-proof bunker. It is now 3:30 in the afternoon.
Well, you go downstairs, and you go downstairs, and you go downstairs, and you go downstairs. I mean, it's a long way down. And then you emerge and go through a series of hallways and special doors, blast doors, and so forth. And then you enter into a conference center, which is, you know, several stories underground.
I do remember going underground.
White House photographer Eric Draper records the moment as the president convenes a meeting of his national security team on a video teleconference.
Well, Secretary of Defense, the Director of Central Intelligence, the Vice President, myself, Dr. Rice, who was with the Vice President.
And we sat down and the President said, first of all, let me tell you that whoever did this to us, we're going to get them. George, you get ready. Don, you get ready.
He was ice cool, and I thought very appropriately so.
And I remember the President was saying, we're going to find out who did this, we're going to seek them out, and then we're going to destroy them.
And then he said, and I'll be back tonight. I'm coming back tonight. And he said it in a way that it was pretty clear that there was no arguing with him this time.
The Secret Service didn't want him to come back. And he asked me then what I thought, and I said, I think it's okay to come on back.
Just before 5 p.m., Air Force One is readied for takeoff. A few moments later, in the air, the president walks to the rear of the plane.
He just like leaned in and said, hey. And I said, hey, sir, how's it going? He goes, I'm all right, how are you?
And he pointed at our notebooks, said no, meaning this is off the record, you can't report this.
So I said, were you able to reach Mrs. Bush? And he came over and actually patted me on the back, and he said, I just talked to her, thanks for asking.
There was an antsiness about him. He couldn't wait to get back to Washington. He couldn't wait to do something, say something.
It is late afternoon. Congressional leaders stream back to Washington and gather on Capitol Hill. More than 200 members are waiting.
Congress will convene tomorrow.
As we started to leave the lectern and the area of the steps, somebody on the House side,
someone began to sing God Bless America.
God bless America, my home, sweet home.
The president arrives at Andrews Air Force Base.
At approximately 6:42, POTUS Board's Marine One looks very somber, but does salute.
On the way to the White House,
the helicopter flew a path this day over the mall, and off the left side window you could see the Pentagon. So it was the president's first eye-to-eye connection with the attack on our country. And he said aloud to nobody in particular, the mightiest building in the world is on fire. That's the 21st century war you just witnessed.
At the White House, government officials wait, with Vice President Cheney and Laura Bush.
The First Lady was there when he arrived, and they embraced.
When you first saw the president that day, when he arrived back, can you describe what he was like, what his mood was like?
Well, for all of us, it was somber. It had been a very emotional day.
Was he angry?
Determined, I would say.
I could tell he was angry. I could tell he was as emotional as any of us about the day.
Darkness falls across the east.
No chase on it. There is no chase on it.
In New York, exhausted rescuers desperately search for survivors.
Although Tower 2 was the second tower to be struck, it was the first to fall down. And that's where my brother was.
Air Force Public Affairs Officer Don Arias last talked to his brother Adam moments before the second tower was struck.
I knew that night that when he didn't come home from work, that he didn't make it. I just knew in my heart that he didn't make it.
And in Washington, National Guard Humvees patrol the streets.
And the city was just different. It was so quiet here, so quiet. There were the helicopters above, but it was still very quiet.
In the White House, the president prepares to address the nation.
The word war crept into the language, and then it went out again, and we argued whether it was the right word.
Well, he used the word during the course of the day that we were at war. My recollection is that he was concerned about that his speech that night needed in part to be reassuring to the American people.
He made a number of edits and suggestions, and he finalized his words, and he addressed the American people from the Oval Office.
The president's sitting at his desk on the other side, just moments away from addressing the nation. And in the frame, you can see the opening words to his statement.
It is 8:30 in the evening.
Good evening. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack.
In the bunker below, CIA Director George Tenet and members of the president's cabinet and national security team watched the speech.
It's one of those, moments where you can hear a pin drop.
We had watched him downstairs in the PIOC, and then he came and joined us, and we, congratulated him. It was the first time we were all together. And it was a tense time, but I recall it also as being a calm time.
The president's normal routine, particularly in a large setting like that, is to start with the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, and go on through the members who were present to get the latest report.
We really began to hand out assignments for the next day to begin to think about response.
He made it clear that this was not to happen again. I think he used words like, don't ever let this happen again.
There was a task ahead of us. There was a serious job ahead of us. And the president was ready for it. And we were there ready to help him.
And that's where they started planning for what would become war.
I mean, the order was get the troops ready. It was that simple. It was that direct. Get the troops ready.
It is 9:30 p.m. Only 12 hours have passed since the attacks began. A day that dawned full of possibility and promise ends on the eve of war. So much in just 12 hours, and who among us ever imagined that we would see the country go into a sort of a lockdown? But that's what we did that day, and we haven't really come out of it yet. Symptomatic of that, the fact that the Vice President right now back in a secure facility.
Thanks very much. That's extraordinary to relive it in that fashion. Charles Gibson.